Hi, I'm Brian Clark, and in response to Karsten's request that we share some of our souvenirs of trips that we've had overseas and also around Australia, even in my case, I'd like to share this one first of all. This was the first trip I ever had to Australia from New Zealand, which was my home. And as a result of coming here, I settled here with two Americans and started up the Flim Flam Singing Telegram Company. And that's a portrait of me in my younger and skinnier days. As Mr. Flim Flam. It was drawn by a local artist who was a friend of one of the singers that worked for me. And that's where my journey started in Australia with Mr. Flim Flam. So following on from that, at the age of about 40, I remember I went to Kathmandu and had a wonderful experience there and bought some of these souvenirs back from Kathmandu, including this rug that I leave in an appropriate place in the back of our car to keep things nice and tidy. After going to Kathmandu, I then joined a trek up to Everest Base Camp, and one of the things I bought on that base camp trek was this particular warm, very warm Russian hat of some kind. It looked after me while we were travelling up in those freezing cold conditions. One of the other trips that I've done over the years was a trip, I've been to America many times on business, but one of the trips I did to America the first time was to go to Hawaii. It was the wedding that I was attending of friends of mine, dear friends of mine for many years, Marvin and Shrioka, and this picture that I took was looking over the beach at Waikiki, and what I loved about this was the fact that you had all forms of transport with regard to sea transport. The canoe, the sailing boat, the outrigger, and in the distance one of the larger cruise ships. It's like all at once. That was a beautiful experience. I enjoyed that so much that as part of that trip I then went to study at Disney University. Went there for 3 weeks study, and one of the things that I came back with was this college jacket from Disney. Now, I must admit, you won't catch me wearing it nowadays, but there was a time when I thought it was quite cute to wear. It certainly reminds me of my time at Disney University. I learned a lot there about customer-focused customer service. As a result of what I did at Disney, I also travelled at different times, and one of the times I travelled was to China, to Beijing, with a client of mine, Stephen Edwards, another dear friend. And this reminds me of the time I came back with this thinking of us travelling all through China, which is very relevant in today's world, thinking about China. And we had a wonderful time. Stephen Edwards of Edwards Slate, he imports slates from China, from Europe and from India. And we went travelling all through the times and places in villages in China. We were looked after really well. Not only that, what we also enjoyed was the fact we took a trip to the Great Wall, and I ran up and down the Great Wall a great distance, which is a special time for me. Following the work that I did in those areas, I also spent some time flying over to America on other business trips, and one of those times had me in a place called La Jolla, which is in San Diego. And La Jolla, I found this beautiful sculpture, original sculpture of, it's called Eternal Love, two dolphins. I bought this for my late mum and dad for their 50th wedding anniversary on behalf of me and my brother Alan and my sister Jenny, and gave it to mum and dad. The fact that I now have it is after mum and dad both passed away at different times in the last 10 or 15 years. That was one of the heirlooms I got to keep, which reminds me of my mum and dad and the beautiful times that we had as part of their blessed family. As a result of all that I was doing, I decided to lead study tours overseas to America and to Europe, taking organisations, people from companies in Australia to best practice study tours. I led over about 8 years in the 90s, 15 study tours to America. And during that time, every time we went, I also made sure that everyone on my tour had a memento, in this case a bit like the college jacket from Disney, and as you can see, world-class best practice study tours. Now I had a lot of different coloured ones, but I kept this blue one, which was a favourite of mine. I still wear it occasionally. Other things that remind me of my study tour to America was the time we spent at Southwest Airlines. That was an amazing organisation. So much love, so much care for all of their people and their clients and customers, and such a successful airline by doing the things that matter the most, which is having a culture of care, of support, and very successful as a result. So I love that little heart, which is the story of Southwest Airlines. Not only that, their call sign on the New York Stock Exchange is LUV, love. One of the other kitschy things I bought while I was overseas at one point or another was these cufflinks. Now, the truth is I don't wear cufflinks anymore, but I just really love The Simpsons, and therefore these cufflinks showing Bart and Homer Simpson was a particular favourite of mine. I used to wear occasionally. I don't wear them anymore, but keep them as a memento. Also, during the work I was doing, I travelled to Munich in Germany, working with BMW in one of their many courses on coaching around quality, and this was one of the mementos for the time that I spent working with BMW, and in particular the time I spent at their Munich head office for 3 weeks in training. At some time after those single days of business, I met my beautiful wife Esther, and as you can see, this was me and her in our younger days. The first trip we ever had was to actually local, from Melbourne up to Sydney. That was our first time away, spent in each other's company, enjoying the experience of first love. That then developed further into us getting married, and one of the trips we did was, I think the first trip we did actually was to Vanuatu. It was part of one of our honeymoon experiences, and as you can see, I bought this in Vanuatu and the picture that goes with it. It reminds me of the wonderful time we had. Esther and I also had the occasion to travel to a place, Chiang Mai, where we were on a mission trip, and while I was in Thailand, coming out of Chiang Mai, I bought this beautiful watch. I don't wear it anymore, but it still reminds me of our time together. Another trip that the two of us had before we had children was to Singapore, and this carving, I don't know if there's a likeness there or not, but this carving was of me in one of those markets that you often find people doing interesting things. At some point along the track, we had our two beautiful children, Sam and Sophie, and the first trip we ever did overseas with the children and us was on a cruise ship. Now, cruise ships are pretty much a scary thought right now, but back then, going all around the Mediterranean, it was pretty amazing. And on the way to our cruise ship, which was berthed originally in Venice and went all the way around the Adriatic coast and then around the other side of Italy until we end up in Barcelona as our final port of call. But before we got to that cruise ship, we also went to London and also over there in Paris. And we had a beautiful time there. Now, Sam's now 17 and Sophie's now 14, so this is a long time ago. But it reminds me of the wonderful time we had there. Another one of our many trips, we used to go overseas quite regularly every year for a holiday for the children. One of the places we went to was Fiji. And that's the memento I took back from Fiji for the time we had that as a family. And of course, many times, other than going to New Zealand, where I was born, we also went back to the Philippines to see Esther's parents and her father, and also her sisters and brother. She has quite a large family, and this is one of the mementos from that time. We've been many times to the Philippines. That was just one of those times. And by the way, before we go any further, if you look down there and see our dog, Princess, who is lying there happily, that huge dog came from New York. I bought that dog in one of my large cases. It filled up the whole case once, even before I had a family or a dog. And our own dog, Princess, has decided that this is her bed, one of many she uses. Now, as the days have gone on, and the weeks and years have moved on, I'll just move the dog. She doesn't move much, she likes to sleep. Of late, recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, I forget exactly when, I went to New Zealand on my own once to go to the grand final of the World Cup when it was being played in New Zealand. And I could be not more blessed than to say that the All Blacks won that grand final. I bought that as part of the memento of that. It's got a bit dusty of late, but hey, the All Blacks will always be the best as far as I'm concerned. They've got an amazing record in the modern era since 2000, when they went to become as part of the World Cup rugby, when it went professional, excuse me. They have an 86% win-loss ratio, which is the best of any sport team anywhere in the world ever. In the last 10 years, it's now jumped up to over 90%. So they have a culture that sustains over many, many years. Moving on from that, and the time I spent in New Zealand, of course I had to buy a book to go with it. Just last year, I went with Sam and Sophie and myself, and we went back to my alma mater, my school that I grew up in and went to secondary school in, and that was Auckland Grammar School. The reason we went back was because it was our 150th anniversary, so it's a pretty special time. I still have the hat that I took back that I wore in the school days, although it doesn't fit anymore. But while I was over there, I also bought a memento to go along with the wonderful book, which was, of course, the Grammar Scarf. It reminds me of those days when life was a lot simpler. Moving on a little bit longer from here, Sam and I had also been on a mission trip together, and this one was to Palm Island to do what we could through Sam's school to help with the people on Palm Island. They need a lot of help. They really do deserve everything that we can do to support them as a community. We had a wonderful time there. We learnt a lot. We learnt a lot about the Indigenous community and the struggles they've had. Both Sam and I came away with a much more understanding and well-rounded point of view. Something that we were sort of, you could say, hidden from by just living down here in Melbourne. So it really opened our eyes. Sam also, I love this because Sam himself last year with part of his school went on a mission trip to Cambodia, and he brought this back as a small memento. Although it's not my memento, it reminds me of the servant heart that Sam has. And these may look not really like a souvenir, but last year the family and I, Esther and Sam and Sophie and I, went to Bali. We had a ball. We had a wonderful time. We went to one of those retreats where you just hang out and do nothing. We didn't go to Kuta. We just stayed where we were in a beautiful spa, just spending time as a family. And yeah, I never wore these, but I brought them home as a reminder. Now, a couple of years ago, we also went to Uluru as a family, first time we'd been together, and I came back with these two beautiful Indigenous paintings, along with the one just behind us here of the sea and the waves, from local Indigenous artists. As we stroll down this way, I want to show you one other memento that I'm really, really happy to share. Please excuse the table tennis table. As you can imagine, that was normally outside, but in this day and age where we have to be careful, we brought this into so that we could enjoy ourselves inside. Whether it's hot, cold, windy or wet, it doesn't matter. We can be playing all the time. Normally things will be arranged a bit differently. But if we come in here, this is one of my most favourite mementos of all time. The time that I went to America, I managed to make contact with the agent of Robin Williams, no doubt. And Robin Williams very kindly answered when I sent a request to his agent saying, could I have some memento of my most favourite movie of all time, Dead Poets Society. I'm a teacher, a trainer, so this really resonated with me. It took a few months, but down the track, Robin Williams sent to me personally a beautiful signed copy of Dead Poets Society. And if you come in really closely, it's faded now, you can actually see there's writing on that. That writing was from Robin Williams, and he was saying to me, dear Brian, amore vincit, love conquers all. And as a thought, I'd like to share this with you. Just as Robin Williams, being one of my most favourite actors of all time, said, love conquers all. And in this time when we are facing what we think is incredible struggles and challenges, as we self-isolate at home with our family, it brings us closer together. And yet through social media, through technology, we can stay close as a family unit, almost like a cocoon, and yet we can reach out through electronic media to those who we hold dear around the world or across the country, or even just across the city if we can't see them personally. It allows us to reach out more and use social media or digital technology as a way to connect rather than push ourselves away. And that leaves me with the final thought. On the other side of my t-shirt, talking about Amore Vincent, love conquers all, as Robin Williams said it, I have this to say. That's right. Share the love, not the virus. Thank you. That's a quick journey through some of the trips I've had while I've been away.